So, you guys come here often? Is this your first time?
Not once a week.
To the podcast? Oh, really?
From time to time.
Yeah. You wanna come on the show with me sometime?
Confused and scared. I'm uncomfortable.
There's snorting and wheezing
Speaking
happening.
of uncomfortable, there are some moments in these next two movies that make people very uncomfortable, but yet somehow it still kind of gives you the warm fuzzies inside. This podcast has not one, but two movies that gives you.
I felt a lot of emotions.
You often feel a lot of emotions, I would say.
Yeah. From the beginning to the end, there's
some emotions.
Big range.
And this may surprise you, but Pat feels no emotions whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because he's dead inside.
Yeah.
Because he's dead.
That's because I took all the emotional genes.
That's true.
They used them all on me.
Folks,
no one had any room for my emotions.
None. Guys,
them.
this week's going to be a fun one. We start talk about two Oscar-winning movies from the previous year in ramping up to our Oscar season. Happy New Year. We got a new podcast for you, folks. Thanks for listening. And we've got a podcast. Here we go.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Muttering for it. Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
I love you.
I know.
Go! Get to the chopper!
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
I see dead people.
Milk was a bad choice.
Hello and welcome to another episode of How to Be a Movie Snob. Happy New Year and welcome. I'm your host, Seth, and I am just happy to be here. And hopefully we are still here since this is the future for us. But
Yeah.
Happy New Year, Mariah.
Happy New Year. Happy Y2K.
Happy Y2K plus 23. Happy New Year, Pat. How's it going up
Hey,
there?
Happy New Year.
In the Washingtonians area.
Well, we watched the fake ball drop over the Space Needle, as we always do.
Oh, it's the worst.
At 9 o'clock?
In case you guys don't know,
Yeah, I love the 9 o'clock.
the 9 o'clock. Yeah.
I love it.
By the way, guys, I am joined by Mariah and Patrick here on the New Year episode. In case
Seth.
you don't know, hi, Pat. The West Coast is the best place to have the New Year's parties because you can choose when to have them at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
when the New York ball drops
If you want
live.
your children around, maybe.
Yep. And then, and frankly, it's almost the last New Year's of the year on Earth. So everyone's had New Year's except for like Hawaii. So it's pretty great.
Pretty late to the...
Late to the party, so to speak. That was also speaking of Y2K, that was kind of the bummer, Y2K. You're like, well, everyone else seems fine.
Nothing happened.
Nothing's happened 12 hours later. Then we turn
Upon reflection, it seemed a little
sus.
nutty to assume that things would just
Turns out computers could handle 00.
go back. We're going to go back to the dark ages.
That's so
guys.
good. I was so disappointed. I remember we had a bonfire outside waiting for the fireworks to go off, World War III, and nothing. Just cold. It was just cold.
Did you guys stock up on food and stuff?
No, we weren't smart Y2Ks. We just wanted to have a good party at the end.
Go out with a bang.
Go out with a bang, but it was more about this is lame. Kind of like the market crash of the tech boom back then as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, folks, we have another movie for you, and we actually have a double feature this week, kind of a double doozy. You know what I mean? A double doos.
Multiple discussion.
Multiple sessions. We're gonna start. So it's gonna be a hard one for the hot takes, but I give you carte blanche here, folks. You can do a hot take of either movie, which is nice, or hot take of the situation of them being in the award situation that we're talking about. That was kind of vague for the listener, but I think the two hosts understand what I mean by
The awards situation.
Oh.
Oh, boy.
Okay, guys, I'll start us off because you guys seem a little.
Thank you.
Yeah, I understand you had a late
we
night.
need help.
Late night last night. Late night last night. I get it.
This is the first?
This is the first. I think it is the first today. Listener, we totally know what's going on. These awards, the two winners show how much the Oscars have changed almost perfectly with these two selections from what it used to be and how they used to honor movies to what it is today. And I think it's actually kind of cool. These two films that we're going to talk about today are a very fun, kind of high-level cinema mark in a very weird world of cinema that we're in with all the superheroes and other things like that. So it's a very refreshing cinema mark for these two movies to win the Oscars. So that's my positive hot take again, Pat. There I go, being positive again.
No, I think that's okay. I think my hot take is good movies typically are about specific relationships that people can relate to. So, adoptive brothers in arms, mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, right? Like these are all of these winners were stories about that, surrounded by a lot of different genre and medium differences, but at their core, they're just relationship stories, which is what humans always gravitate toward. And when they're told well, they sometimes get an award.
Yeah.
That was a hot take. Movies are about relationships, guys.
Bland
Yeah.
take.
Well, it's that it's the same. Like as much as things change
that's better.
from a craft and idea perspective, it still all has to come back to relationships between people because we're monkeys and that's what we need to relate.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
Someone other.
I think I would maybe piggyback on that and say, it's really all about good storytelling. And most of the stories are all kind of centered around the same kind of
Okay, I got it, guys. I'm going to take
typical things. But
here we go.
My hot take is that today, not only are they doing all the things that they've always done, but they continue to break barriers with each year. That, it shows that you could have been nominated 20 years ago for something and you're a fresh face again. It's like we're rediscovering people and,
I'm not dead yet.
Gender, race.
You'll be stone dead in a moment.
I think that's kind of, or retelling the stories, I think is kind of what I took. That's my hot take from this year's.
I'm going to do a hot take summary. The plot doesn't matter as long as you have good relationships. Hot take. Boom. No, not as good. Okay, fine.
I mean, I'd go with it.
I'd go with it. It feels weird to talk about these movies now because they've been talked about so much last year and because it was it was refreshing to see movies that aren't just superhero movies be like, oh yeah, there can still be good movies out there. And I think this, with studios like A24, you see there is still good filmmaking out there. That's not just blockbusters, and blockbusters have
original ideas.
Yes, and not taken from something else or want to be franchised or build the next world or universe, because everyone wants to figure out the new magic potion to figure out the new world of something.
And 2022 had I felt like it was a year that had some really great options in the list.
Yeah,
that weren't franchisee kind of movies.
So, folks, in case you haven't told, we are talking about the two Oscar winners. One of them, of course, is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That's right, the best multiverse movie of the year. Also happened to be the best, according to the Oscars, movie of the year, with a chorus of long-forgotten actors. Well, not completely forgotten, but, some of them were haven't seen since,
They were dormant.
The Goonies.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, some hadn't acted
in years.
Yeah.
And some of them had acted all along the way, but never been this close to an Oscar and won an Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just it felt very just nostalgic, but yet so refreshing of a win. I remember actually cheering for this movie when I was watching it.
It was such a great story. They all felt like worthy winners.
And I felt like I was cheering for it and I hadn't even seen it.
Oh, because you hadn't seen it yet.
No, but I was
Oh,
sold.
that's
I was
great.
convinced by everybody. Like, of course these guys should win. Of course, I
Yes.
love it. I love the speeches. I love.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Oh.
sold it to me without having to watch the movie, and then I watched the movie, and
Yes.
yeah.
The other movie.
Confirmed.
Oh, sorry. The other movie we are going to talk about today is Guillermo del Toro. Sorry, Pat. I don't know why I'm apologizing to you for messing up Guillermo.
Because I care the
Is he-
most.
is
You
he-
do.
He's cringing the
He is
hardest.
cringing the hardest. He's like,
tries to say-
my favorite director. What are you doing?
Oh, boy.
And no, not with starring Tom Hanks. Just kidding, folks. We are talking about the animated feature Pinocchio. And animated is a very interesting word because I'll be honest, I did not realize that this form was an animation form.
Absolutely.
I didn't realize. I mean, I did, but like it still is weird to me because it's like, does it? I'm like, you're not drawing though. You gotta have a piece of paper and pencil and maybe some, put it
Well,
in
what
there.
do you call claymation? What do you call the California raisins?
A good commercial, best commercial of all time. That's what I call it.
Avoid
Pretty good
the
video
Noid.
game.
Pretty good video game, yeah, yeah. when Michael Jackson wants to sing for you and not get credit, that's a good commercial. That's a good commercial. This one I hadn't seen. I out of the three of us had seen this before this week. But this Pinocchio, this is the first time I've seen it. And is this also the first week for you guys?
It was my first time actually seeing.
Oh, that's
Pinocchio.
great.
Mine too.
I'd seen everything already. But I rewatched that, and then Pinocchio is one of those like, I knew like, well, I need to watch this at some point, and I just never did. Like,
Oh, for sure.
many things. There's too much media,
Yeah.
There's so many choices.
but I'm very happy I did.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my first question is for Mariah. How, when you watched Everything Everywhere All at Once, first reaction?
First reaction.
Did you know that was that crazy? Did you know?
No, I
Okay, that's
didn't know
perfect.
it
Oh,
was
that's
that
perfect.
crazy at
I forgot how crazy.
Oh,
it
I
was
knew there
in,
was-
in wonderful ways.
I knew
Oh
there
my
was
gosh.
action. I didn't know about the multiverses. I didn't know what Jamie Lee Curtis's part was in it.
Yes.
Everything that happened
Yes.
everywhere was amazing to me. All
Did
at
you know
once.
that Jonathan Key Kwan was in it? The guy
Yes.
from Good. You knew? Okay.
Yes,
So you knew
yes,
that.
yes.
Okay. Because when I watched that, I was like, what? This is awesome.
Well, the guy that plays the dad, I can't remember his name,
Yes.
but
A girl with green eyes.
I loved having him in it. I was like, he's been old for 50 years and he's still wheeling around this movie, and I loved him.
So good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, James Hong.
Yes.
There we go.
Yeah, and yes, he's one of those people who's literally been old.
Yeah.
Since
for
he was
50
young.
years.
Yeah. He's like Patrick Stewart. He was old as soon as he started acting. That's great. Yeah. Because it was just when I just remember thinking, what am I watching? I don't even know. You know, it's funny. I just watched the show Loki. And I realized, I'm like, not only does it have Kwan in it, it also has very similar feelings and even like I assume some of the same animations as Everything Everywhere All at Once. Have you seen Loki yet? Pat, have you seen Loki?
Yes.
Okay, so
season 2 specifically.
Yeah, season
is where
2,
Ki Kwan comes
the
in.
end of it, and it gets crazy.
And he was cast because of Everywhere.
which makes sense because it feels like it's the
Yeah.
same universe basically, which is hilarious. I think Marvel's like, oh shoot,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do that. Zoink.
Well, and he's just so charming and
Oh yeah, but
cute.
even
Well,
like
Weirdo.
Michelle seems to be in every single movie that's out there right now.
Yes.
I mean, she's been
Yes.
in what, like 10 things just in the last 5 minutes? And
Oh
she's
my
great
gosh.
in all of them.
so great, so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
really appreciated in the movie, like how, like through the lens of the multiverse, how you can get schlubby Michelle Yeoh
So good.
and Ki Kwan, and then dashing
Oh,
versions of them, and you're
Gorgeous
like,
people.
Yeah.
it's so crazy
So fun.
because it was convincing in every version. You're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, she's a movie star, and look how amazing she looks.
And yet
And then
Jamie
she's,
Lee
like,
Curtis looks
put upon
exactly the same in each
Awful.
version.
Oh, that's a good
Yeah.
bit. That's a
And
great bit.
but also, like, she could get all done up and looks great.
Yeah.
But she leaned into that, like, I am
I'm going to let
this
my...
office worker
Yeah.
with a hand, injury. It was super good.
It's super
the
good.
whole hot dog finger.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, no.
universe.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
you
no,
could buy gloves of those for a
That
little while.
was nuts.
Yeah, so good. Oh
And
my
all
gosh.
the weird things you needed to do to like trigger the. Oh my gosh! It was so clever.
It reminded me
I
of
loved
Yeah.
it.
the movie The Wrestler. Is it The Wrestler with the bad guy in Iron Man 2? That he's like
You mean Iron Man
Mickey
too.
Rourke.
Mickey Rourke. He has to staple something against his head in one of the wrestler scenes, and they have to do that in everything at
yeah.
once. I'm like, this is so many things going in orifices that shouldn't be going. I mean, whatever. But
The rush to get to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you forgot about that scene, didn't you?
The running and jumping.
Oh, so funny. So this movie, we could talk about this the whole time, but we're going to actually skip past this because I feel like this movie's been talked about so much when it came out because it was mind blowing, a just nostalgia fest of actors you've loved for literally decades. And people who you just wanted to get credit for, and they all kind of got this credit. And then, of course, I feel like Brendan Fraser winning for The Whale also got lumped into the nostalgia, like, oh, yeah. And then you got Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, it feels like everything about the Oscars last year was underdogs.
Yes.
Big comebacks.
Right. But yet still so good. The other thing I didn't ever realize is the directors for this movie, known as the Daniels.
Which is great.
It's just so great. So before this movie came out, they did a video, very low budget music video that kind of everyone was like, you did that for how much money? And do you know what music video I'm talking about? Pat?
I probably heard, but I don't remember what it is.
Turned down for what? That's like one of the first thing the Daniels are known for. And it's the guy you going through like floor to floor, and there's some sorts of there's shout outs to that in this movie, and I'm like, these guys are just genius. It's like the weirdest kind of inappropriate, which is the same like Everything Everywhere at Once movie for like super low budget, but like it was like one of the best music videos that year because it was just everyone's like, did you see that ridiculous video? And then ever since then they just kind of like one up their game, and now they have a budget. And
but it also felt like they embraced like all the science fiction-y stuff was very low budget B movie.
Yes.
Tech, right? Like cobbled together pieces, especially when like Gong Gong like gets his mech out of like printers and and you're like, what?
Yeah.
So it was great. Like there's amazing VFX in this movie.
Yes,
but then they really embraced the lo-fi look
right
at times, which
For
was
sure.
delightful. It made it, I don't know, kind of took the
piss out of you British there.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's quite right. But even and just like Raccoonie,
there we go.
Such a dumb puppet.
But
it's like that's
silly.
perfect.
It's so perfect. Yeah.
The bagel.
So I wanted to talk about these movies this week because of this is starting Oscar season, and Oscars is a funny award that are not the same as snobby movies. I just want to start out there.
No, they do not equal.
No, because in fact, sometimes the Oscar-winning movies are anything but snobby movies. And I would dare say, because 2 weeks ago we did the first Oscar-winning movie ever, Wings from 1927. And during that episode, we talked about how at the time, it really wasn't a snobby movie. It was literally the blockbuster. Special effects, most famous actress, total sex appeal, unapologetic. You had good-looking actors. Shoot, even the first guy who dies in it becomes the most famous guy. Like, it was just like star-studded, and it's snobby now because it's a silent film, has some amazing things that changed cinema.
The budget was huge.
But the budget was huge. Yeah. And so that was what the Oscars were back then. And it continued to go in that trend for a lot of years. Like you'd have like Ben-Hur winning, and you'd have these bigger budget movies winning.
Epics,
if you will. And I was thinking about that with how it's changed and how the Oscars have kind of changed in several ways. And the other one is some categories that don't exist anymore. Didn't exist at that time. Sorry, went backwards there. Because now there's just more Oscars to win. And we've already talked about the greatest animated movie of all time. What is it? Is it Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? Is it Spirited Away? Or is it, Pat's favorite, Land Before Time? I mean, there's a lot of choices here that could be. I know Pat's actual favorite is Land Before Time 4, I think. That's his favorite of the Land Before Time series. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Also Return to...
Ducky gets his groove back.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas I like Return of
Or
Jafar.
her groove.
Return of Jafar, the best Aladdin. But the second movie, which we're going to talk way more about today, is the best animated feature of 2022. And they didn't even have an animated feature until 2002, I believe, or 2001. So this is like a relatively new category.
Because they just got so tired of not being able to win.
Right.
Like, we're going to get our own category.
2001.
2001. Also, which is funny, because the first international Academy Award for International Feature Film was in 2000. Oh no, that was a while ago since they had it in 1947. I take that all back. I looked at the second when they changed the name. But they've always had a foreign film that also wins an award since 1947. But then we've already reviewed Parasite last season, which was actually the best foreign film and the best film of the year. So that's kind of fun to be like, oh, this is the films we're going to talk about today were shot in multiple countries and were made in multiple countries. So this concept of like, it's just so different of what it means to be made in America versus made overseas. And a lot of these lists are going to have to try to figure out what that is. Like the American Film Institute always has the movies that are made in America, but what is American film anymore? If like half of them are being edited overseas or shot, like what makes it American or not?
Well,
So,
VFX films are largely getting created, internationally as well, because that's where cheaper labor can be.
Sometimes that's right.
So,
and so this is kind of like just a study of where the awards were and where they are going to. And we're going to talk about it by talking about a delightful movie that everyone needs to see, because I think this animated feature was so good. Especially, and it's such a bummer. Did any of you guys research why they came out with the Disney live action the same year this came out? I assume it was to compete with it, but
coincidence,
or was it just a
maybe?
coincidence?
I assume it's the Dante's Peak volcano, scenario where it's just like
right.
They were just happening.
Just bad.
Because this movie was long in the making.
Yeah.
So long.
And went through a bunch of, trouble.
Yeah.
Get to screen. So I think it just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Disney's just been going through their roster of live action. They're like, well, we haven't done Pinocchio yet.
That's true. That's true. And they haven't done Snow White yet. So the other thing I want to talk about is if the Oscars were the same as they were in 1927, just before we jump into the movie, I would have thought Top Gun Maverick would have been the winner of this last year. Do you guys think that's kind of like what it would be back then? Because it's
that was the exact.
epic.
That is the modern version of Wings, 100%.
100%. And I thought that was
And it got a nom.
for like sound or something.
Yeah.
Or
No, it got
No,
on
it
for
was
Best
a-
Picture.
it was
Oh,
the
you're
best
right. It
picture.
was. And actually,
Knowing that it was not going to win.
100%.
But it was kind of like of course this should get nominated.
Which is so great.
Well, they expanded to 10, right? And so now you do get more of the blockbusters in there than you used to.
Which I think is smart, because they should have. And this is another question too. Why have the Oscars demonized blockbusters? Is it because they're not as good, really? Or is it just because they want, or is it because they actually shift to do movies that are lesser seen? Because it seems like the Oscars seems to be more of a, let's show the movies that are lesser known, that are more artistic, rather than things we know are going to sell.
I think there was a snobbiness to it and a gatekeeping. And honestly, now, I mean, the big reason why they're let in is to have movie stars come to the Oscars.
Right.
Right? Like they want Tom Cruise at the Oscars, and so they need his film to be nominated.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. And to get more people to watch, right? They're like, well, I like Top Gun, I'll watch the Oscars. And then you're like, I've never heard of The Whale, like, what's that?
It's depressing, but really well done.
Well, and this movie, Pinocchio, wasn't released in theaters. This is a streaming movie.
Yeah.
This was Netflix.
I mean, it technically was
limited
they always
release because they have to be. But
very
yeah,
but-
you're right.
But the way anybody saw it.
Yeah,
Point
exactly
taken.
right. Yeah. And that's going to be true of some of the movies we're going to talk about for this upcoming Oscar season as well. It's this weird time where you can't use box office numbers anymore to see how well a movie's doing, because that's my biggest. I wanted to see how well did the Disney Pinocchio do versus this Pinocchio. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, the
I have
numbers.
no idea.
The numbers aren't helpful.
I have no
for
idea
this
anymore.
one.
So
Sorry.
the numbers game is kind of a bummer. We've lost that. That's the whole aspect of
I
telling
just lost
whether
my
it was.
job.
So this is Mariah's last episode, folks. This is how we're
I can
announcing.
still-
I can throw a lot of dates
summarize.
out.
Yeah,
though.
I still got to summarize it.
Dates happen.
So that's the other thing I want to talk about. And I also want to talk about real quick before we get to the summarizing is the day I knew the Oscars was different, and I still think it's the worst loss in Oscar history, when Saving Private Ryan didn't win the Oscar. I remember that and thought, what the crap is going on? Because you know who it lost to?
I don't remember.
Shakespeare in Love.
Oh yeah,
And you know why
that
it
was
lost?
a whole
That was a tragedy.
thing.
And that's because that was the first
Harvey
time.
Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein. And that's how it changed
Everyone's
Oscars
favorite.
forever. Yes. Because he first time lobbied for his movie. And now that's like commonplace. But that's the first time they did that. And if you go back and watch those movies today, you're like, why? Why? That makes no sense.
Oh yeah.
It makes no sense. So that was when I started to get angry at the Oscars. Because I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah. And I think maybe they're just trying to make a comeback and redeem themselves from that maybe decade of unfortunate choices. And
I don't hate a ton in that time. Chicago,
Yeah, it was fun.
skeptical of
yeah.
over like Two Towers and Gangs of New York, but
Yeah.
there's definitely
Yeah.
Crash was another one that people felt
Oh yeah,
wasn't
Crash was
deserved, but
so of the moment, and so many big stars.
Yeah.
That was a big get people there. Yeah,
like over Brokeback, I think was kind of
yeah, that's a little bit.
thing. Anyway,
Yeah, but
let's talk about Pinocchio.
All right,
What?
guys, finally we got to it. 30 minutes in, we're ready to talk about the movie. So this is the best animated feature of 2022. This is by someone who's super famous for scary movies. What's his genre? What's Guillermo's? What's his genre?
Yeah,
Suspense.
Suspense to horror.
Suspense
in
to
that
horror in a very
realm.
artful,
Fantasy.
loved by fantasy. Yeah, it's fantasy. That would have been fine. We just said fantasy.
Fantasy horror, maybe.
Fantasy horror. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
sure.
okay, Mariah, lay it on us. As if we don't know the. So, although this plot's a little different than the old Disney version.
It's
so.
very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. Not to give away too much talking later, but every version of Pinocchio is a little different. This was Pinocchio, the book, not a book, a serial, was written in 1882 is when it started to come out in Italy.
Oh, cool.
And I think released like 16 parts and then was pulled from the papers. And then people loved it so much, The Tales of the Puppet, that it came back the next year. So there are many sagas, and Disney took pieces of that and, turned them into adorable animated characters and used some of the stories and some of the characters' names, changed some of it. And so did Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
So his version has a lot of
Real mishmash.
yeah.
Of all of
He takes a lot from the story, the original story, but he also, takes it into fascist Italy and
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
puts that spin on it and omits some characters and changes names of some characters and it's so cool. But anyway, it's still basically old man is lonely, toy maker. But in this, he's really grieving the loss of his son.
It was a brutal movie to start out with.
Plants this pine cone at the grave. It grows into this tree. He finally gets really drunk on wine one night and chops the tree down and drunkenly carves out this puppet and doesn't quite finish it, but it's got a shape. And passes out, and this cool and creepy blue fairy, not like the one in the Disney movie.
That came out of the wrong movie. I'm like, whoa.
Life. What does she represent? Life.
Yeah, life and death.
Brings him to life. And she has a counterpart, her sister, who is Death. And
both voiced by the lovely
Tilda Swinton.
Tilda Swinton.
White Witch herself.
Yes. And then there is a cricket named Sebastian J. Cricket instead of Jiminy.
Hot take. He yells the whole time.
Who's a traveling
all he
writer played by Ewan McGregor.
He's exasperated.
He reminds me of like every time Tom Hanks plays a character. What are you doing? Guys! Buzz!
Yeah, very Woody-esque. Yeah.
Well, when everyone around you being an idiot, you're going to yell. Okay?
Yeah. Who's kind of loosely charged with being the conscience,
Pat's
but
already
also lives in the
defending
puppet.
Ewan McGregor.
I love Ewan McGregor,
Me
so
too,
I will
so much.
I will defend him.
Yeah.
But I agree. There was a lot of yelling. He was a little one note.
Yeah.
I was cracking up every time he talked. Ah! I was like,
Adorable.
"You were the chosen one."
And like in the cereal.
You were supposed to be the one.
Hey, I'm summarizing.
Oh, sorry.
Quit your impressions.
We're never gonna get through this movie.
No. Like in the cereal, unlike the Disney feature, the cricket dies kind of several times. Well, gets squashed several times
yeah.
in this. In the cereal, the cricket gets squashed and killed instantly.
What?
Pinocchio steps
right?
on him. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's a
Gets
dark.
like annoyed by him.
It's a darker story. Yeah. Didn't like his yelling, I guess.
Do a little
Squishes
whistle.
him.
Plop.
Give a little whistle.
And
There is a
always
cuckoo
let your
clock in
conscience
both
be
movies,
your
though.
guide.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Would that not
happens, right?
Sorry.
And then Pinocchio
Jiminy Cricket. Listen to me. Shut up, Cricket.
Pinocchio dies a few times in this too. So there's like a little bit of a twist.
That was a funny bit, actually.
To this version where every time Pinocchio dies, he hangs out in purgatory, I guess,
assume
a
so.
little bit longer
Yeah.
with Death, who's also accompanied by a table full of rabbit skeleton guys who are playing cards. And they have like a stack of upright coffins as the backdrop of
You know,
this.
the more you explain it, it either is the
gets
scariest
cooler
movie
and-
or the funniest
yeah,
movie
it
you've
gets
ever seen.
cooler and darker with each death, and the hourglass goes a little longer, and Pinocchio learns a bit more each time, gets a little wiser.
And by the way, Guillermo pulls this off. As ridiculous as this sounds, like
my gosh.
Guillermo pulls
Oh yeah,
this
makes sense in
off.
the movie.
Yeah, they
You're
do.
like, all right, I get this logic.
All right,
Yeah.
rabbit skeletons playing cards.
Yeah,
Let's keep it
Geppetto-
moving.
Yeah.
Geppetto and Jiminy or
Sebastian.
do go looking for Pinocchio. They do get eaten by a big fish, a dogfish, not a whale. Who's way creepier than Monstro, I can
Dude,
tell you.
that was not a whale. That was a dinosaur whale, like
It's a dogfish.
dogfish. There we go.
Yeah. Also translated in Italian as a shark in the story.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
yeah, not a whale. And kind of instead of smoking him out to get him to spit them out like they do in the Disney movie, Pinocchio just starts lying and his nose grows and it pokes him enough.
Tickling his blowhole.
Yeah. Anywho. Then Pinocchio, and this is Pinocchio's last life,
Not
by
necessarily.
the way.
Oh, it is because
And
he
he
broke the
dies.
time glass. Yeah.
He broke a rule.
He broke the hourglass.
He had to get back to
I get
save
back to save Geppetto. That's
And
right.
he saves Geppetto and he dies. But then the sister shows up and I'm sorry I keep calling him Jiminy.
His name's
Sebastian
not Jiminy.
says,
His name's
you said
Sebastian."
I could get a wish for...
Only he yelled it. He didn't say it. He
You
definitely
said
yelled.
I could get a wish
He definitely yelled the
for
whole.
taking care of him, even though I did a bad job of it.
That's literally what I was like. Okay, Ewan, just
He
bring it
did
down a
his
little
best,
bit. Oh
and
my
that's
gosh.
the best anyone can
That's
do.
do.
right. And so he comes back to life. And then he outlives everybody. They all die around him because he doesn't
I
age.
loved
It's
that he didn't
sad and
become a
awesome.
real boy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that by
Like
the
it
way.
was a real boy, but not like a flesh and blood boy. I was very. I loved how weird it got. Honestly, my hot take on this movie was like all the non-traditional Pinocchio parts are my favorite. Like
Nice.
anything that strayed from the story,
Yeah.
where we have fascism and we have the weird,
Well,
instead
of
death
the land
plane.
instead of the land of toys, it's a camp to train them to be soldiers
Yeah.
for Mussolini.
You're
all
not gonna
that
like
stuff
my
I'm
hot
like-
take, Pat, at all.
Heck yes.
I loved those parts, though. I mean, give me some Guillermo del Toro and some cool costumes and horns.
No. Love death.
Give me the creepy creatures.
And he just rips on what's his name? The dictator.
Mussolini. Yeah,
Oh, it's
they made him
hilarious.
all
Like
tiny.
super
They
short,
make him
super doofy,
huge
and
head,
like
I don't like
diminutive.
it.
Yeah.
I don't like this song.
it's so great. Oh, that's so good. And he was. I mean, yeah. So my hot take is that I couldn't take Ewan McGregor's character serious. He just felt like he was trying to be like this slapstick thing that, like, the whole time, like, what are you yelling about? And you got squash again. And now we're back to creepy Guillermo del Toro. Like, he felt the most out of place in this movie of any character. I was like, okay.
You know, I actually have to mention the most unpredictable casting decision.
Oh, this is great. I'm so glad you're
Is
talking
the
about this.
monkey
The monkey's so good.
Played by Kate Blanchett.
That's right.
Who just desperately wanted to be in the movie, and that was the only
Yeah.
part left.
Spazzatura.
Yeah.
The garbage monkey.
But then I realized, I'm like, oh, so because I couldn't figure out when Spazzatura did the voices of the marionettes, that's when you actually hear her voice.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And so I
She
couldn't
also
figure that
squeaked
out.
and made the
She did-
grunting.
Yeah,
noise,
she did
too.
all the-
She did everything. Yeah.
She did.
It was
But I
great.
thought that was great. I was like, wait a minute. Because I was so confused every time Spazzatura made the
I
puppets
loved that,
talk.
and it was like, wait,
Wait,
what?
how?
How is
What?
he doing
You
this?
could have been talking this whole time.
I'm like, wait, you're one of the most famous actresses on this set? And
Yeah.
you're so
Yeah.
good. I assumed, because I always mistake Kate Blanchett and Tilda Swinton anyways. I always thought,
Because they're blonde.
and they're British.
Well, their voices, I could see, yeah. They have like a nice, deep
Yeah.
Sure.
Very good.
voice.
Very nice.
And there's
speaking voice.
gravitas. Yeah.
They're
Kate,
both
Kate Blanchett
elf-like.
could have been deaf.
Literally, both have played like evil elf witches. so
Queen-
what else do we got
queenie
here,
witch
folks? Come on.
people. Yeah, you're right.
So I thought death was one and life was the other.
Oh.
But then I'm like, no, they
I
both.
also thought that.
Yeah, but I'm like, no, they both sound like Tilda. So
Yeah.
maybe it's someone else. And then, yeah, as soon as it said her in the credits, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
Why did she get that little baby part?
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Oh.
It reminds me of Hook. Like everyone and their mother was on Hook, like just in the background, like the boo box person in Hook. Do you know who that was?
No.
The
No.
male pirate who gets put in the boo box with the.
Oh, yes.
Meryl, or
Nope.
not Meryl, the other one. Glenn Close.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm close.
I was like,
Yeah.
this is a Glenn Close moment in
I
Hook.
do
That
remember
was what
that.
I thought. I'm
That
like,
was
this
cool.
is so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
'Cause-
And she's great.
Though I love the casting. I mean, I'm sorry you don't like Ewan's part, but
I mean, it's
the casting
fine.
was
And I love Ewan.
great. I loved who they picked for Geppetto, Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah.
all you
Janitor
need.
David
guy.
Bradley.
All you
Yeah.
need is love. It just felt like Ewan McGregor was being Moulin Rouge character every time he yelled. But all you need
Well-
is love.
But they didn't let him sing till
Oh,
the
I
credits.
do.
which
I
thought
do
was a-
love.
That was
was
pretty
a
great.
funny gag.
I love that.
You know, that reminded me of Monty Python and the
Yes.
Holy Grail.
Yeah.
So good.
No,
You know,
no
there must be-
singing.
Someone somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. So I really liked this movie, and yet have a lot of gripes with it. Ewan McGregor honestly is one. I think he's amazing. I feel like his role wasn't given enough, even though it sounds like they kept adding to his role even
He was like
as they're
the-
making it.
He was the gag guy at the end. It just felt cheap. Like
Well,
a cheap
yeah.
gag
I
at the
feel
end.
like it's a cricket. I mean, I don't really know what you're supposed to be able to
It's
do
a tall.
with a
order
cricket.
for a cricket.
Come on, the best character.
I
in,
think if they would have kept it a little more as strictly narrator.
Yeah.
I mean, because they really didn't give him and Pinocchio much of a relationship. Because he was with Geppetto more than anything.
Very true.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's
they
good-
could have
that's
just
good insight.
basically just had him as an onlooker who, lived inside him kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because
And
Pinocchio never once did what he asked. Never once. So it's like
Pinocchio
what?
was very difficult.
That
toddler
was my
child at
other
the beginning.
issue. He was the worst when he first came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know that I can watch this
Yeah.
because he was so
He's just breaking
It's worse.
everything.
It's worse
Horrifying.
than it was
My
bad.
feet are on fire.
And as
and then it became charming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it
it
became
took a
charming.
little longer than I wanted it.
Well, for
to be
Geppetto,
like,
too,
Okay,
he
I
didn't-
like how new he is.
Geppetto didn't like him either, though. I mean,
Well, and
he
then,
had to
I mean,
grow
you know,
on everybody.
that was rough too.
But that became a story point, right?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
that was like, quit trying to make him the son that you thought was perfect.
Yeah.
He's his own person,
And he's horrible.
and he's perfect in his own way.
Well, and how
But
they
it's
have
like he doesn't know anything about anything. Like
No.
help him out.
they have this discussion in the church, and he's looking up at the carving of Jesus, and he's saying, "Why does everybody
that
like
was a
him?
good
And
line.
he's made out of wood,
I like that. That was
and
my
nobody
favorite.
likes me, and I'm made out of wood." Like he asks some deep, insightful, sweet questions throughout the movie that just kind of, remind you that he is very innocent and doesn't know what being alive is.
Yeah, and don't get me
Until the
wrong.
end.
I think this movie is brilliant because of stuff like that. With the Mussolini, with the Jesus stuff, with the priest and the Nazi stuff. Like it's very
With Candlewick.
it's very
The boy, I liked how they made
my
him the
gosh,
son of
it
the
was
captain
so
guy.
good. So with all these hard hitting, well done parts, and even the life and death, like those are really like powerful. I've never seen Tilda Swinton not hit a home run every time she does a part, frankly.
Yeah, she did great.
So like as soon as she was like, I'm like, oh, I'm sold. I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm creeped out and
Plus,
I'm loving this. And
what
yeah.
I was struck by with those two figures is it looked like they were wearing masks the whole time,
'Cause
and
there's
I
no
kept
expression,
thinking
yeah.
at some point that maybe they would
Ooh, take
have
off
one
the
of them
mask.
come off or
Ooh.
something. I was hopeful
Too much.
for a little
We
bit.
couldn't
I was
handle
like, it's cool.
You don't want to see what's under those masks.
You don't want to see
They're
what's on that
so
stuff.
cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
There's probably a sketch of it somewhere, but no.
Oh, and just just gorgeous.
The
So-
other thing, like,
yeah, go for it, Matt.
the Guillermo-ness of it, and
Yes.
again, like his background in horror. When Pinocchio first comes out, it's nightmare fuel.
Oh
right?
yes,
Like,
he's like the skittering
he's
across the
crawling
floor in the
around.
shadows. Oh, I loved
and it's
it.
like, what
Yes.
is this? It's
Yes.
like that is quite a take on introducing this character.
This is your son.
Is that he's the scariest thing you like? What have I made? Total
Yeah.
Frankenstein
Yeah.
situation.
Which
Like,
is
what have I
they,
done?
They compare this movie to Frankenstein. This like
Yeah,
childlike built person, and
I felt like part of the things that bothered me about the movie was because I grew up with Disney's Pinocchio, I had expectations that when it got close to them, but they were different, I struggled with more, and I kept trying to compare
Right.
characters and stuff. And so then I wasn't just appreciating the movie for what it was.
Bless you, Whitley.
No.
Bless you.
Wrigley also
Yeah.
didn't like that.
Yeah.
But
that's
I
why
think that-
when I was watching
that made
it,
it hard.
I had to look. I went and researched the story, the original story, because I was like, there's multiple versions of this.
Right.
And if you actually look, I mean, the original movie made out of this was like 1911, and it was like a silent Italian.
Ooh, next week, guys.
I
Next
think
week.
also stop animation or something.
Get out of here.
Yeah. And but there's so many versions of this
Wow.
story made, and they're all take pieces of, I mean, because they have like all these parts of the serial, like they're adventures of this puppet, and they're just multiple stories. It's like a comic, you can, you're getting new bits all the time. And I think people just took what they got out of it and turned it into their own story, like with Guillermo turning it into the war and training soldiers, and then the father-son relationship, which he always kind of
puts in every
goes
film.
back
Stuff
to
about fathers and sons.
Yeah.
yeah. And the fact that he remembered watching the Disney version of Pinocchio as a child and thought of it as like a horror movie because of the scary parts. And so from that, like, he was always kind of obsessed with this movie and knew he wanted to make it for a very long time too. I feel like this movie inspired him, the story, like, and then he puts his own amazing twist on it. Yeah, I wanted to do some research and find out which one was closer to the original or if neither were. And from finding out like how many little episodes or chapters or whatever you call the serial that was the original Stories of the Puppet, I think both of them took equal amounts of.
Oh, so there's no winner. They're both the same.
I don't think there was a winner. Maybe one of the other many versions over the last 40 years, turned out closer to that. But they're just, I think that we could do a real deep dive on how many versions of Pinocchio there have been.
That's it, and I didn't know that. Believe this or not, I'm not actually Italian, so I didn't actually know.
And you weren't, and you didn't watch the 1911 version.
No, not recently. No. Obviously, seen it before.
We should probably,
as we all have.
We should probably rewatch.
Yeah, probably should.
I think that's what makes like Guillermo's version feel worthwhile is how much he changed it. Like, taking it from the 1800s, I think, to the 1930s, and it's like all that, which he often does, sets his fantasy against a backdrop of real life horror,
right?
Yeah.
Which is just, it's like such a cool touch, and it makes scary things relatable.
And it's way scarier than actual scary movies, because what's way scarier than a scary movie? War.
And there's always a
scary.
Child. I
Always
mean,
a child.
This compares to Pan's Labyrinth a lot for me. I felt.
I have to see that.
Seth needs to watch
it.
Yeah,
and The Devil's Backbone, kind of similarly.
Oh man, so good. Yeah, no, it made me want to watch all of them right
Hellboy
away.
with the horns.
I've seen Hellboy. I've seen Hellboy 1 and 2.
You've seen Hellboy?
Yeah, that's totally different, by the way.
Blade 2.
I did see Blade 2 as well. Because come on, I was the right age and the right, yeah.
But it's such a fun take, and again, like where I just got like, was every time it veered into the Disney version. I think I just thought like, oh well, like I've seen a version of this, and I just really liked every time it was so different than the version I'd seen. Right, it just felt so fresh. But of course, if you're a young person and you haven't seen the other one, and this is your Pinocchio, what a treat that is, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Unless your Pinocchio is the Tom Hanks Pinocchio, then we apologize to you.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is these are two...
That one kid.
By the way, these are two of the greatest animated movies of all time.
Yeah.
These are literally the...
award-winning.
Top... I bet these could both be on the top 50 list of best animated films. Easy. Easy. Some people even put Pinocchio ahead of Sleeping Beauty. I mean, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because it's used it had like almost the same number of animators, hand drawn, and it was using a lot more of the multi-plane system.
Well, it was a later movie, right?
A later movie, yeah.
But it was better made,
and it was before World War II, so they still had a lot of resources that they didn't have during World War II and then after. So yeah, so some people say this is the pinnacle of Disney. But then is this the pinnacle of stop motion? This is another thing, Pat. I'm going to lean on you here. Take us through what this animation means, because I watched the behind the scenes and I was blown away.
I learned so much just from watching that.
That was crazy. And I'm a huge Nightmare Before Christmas fan and Fantastic Mr. Fox. And I realized the medium's insane and I love it, but I don't know if I could explain why. And so for you, who actually, animates for a living or tells other people to animate for a living.
I still do.
I still do.
What's harder, Pat?
What's harder? What do you think when you see this? Yeah, for sure. Okay. Tell me what you see when you watch this movie.
That it is amazing that people are able to animate this way. It is all largely straight ahead. animation. What I mean by that is like once they start moving their puppets around the scene, they don't get to go back and go, oh, let's change this moment.
Right.
It's like they have to do it right as they go, and they can kind of stop and go back. But once you kind of have your scene going, you start over or you keep what you had. And so there's this like level of craftsmanship needed and thoughtfulness and planning that people like me in 3D animation, and even to some degree in 2D animation, like we can cheat way more than these folks. Like I can build up an animation, but they have to do it final the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just crazy. And you do a lot of things in terms of process to make sure that works. You shoot a ton of reference, which we all do, but they lean harder onto that. They have their timing sheets worked out. I think they talked about in one of the documentaries, the X sheets or dope sheets, what they're called. It's basically on these frames, this should happen. So they really know where their character needs to get. It's all blocked out.
Every frame.
It's just, you're just sort of constantly looking, the equivalent in 2D, you're flipping your pages and seeing like, does this look right? And you got to know where you're going. But it's insane. When it's good, it is magic to me how they still do it.
It blows my mind.
I do this every day.
Yeah.
And it's like, they are magicians, like the good ones.
Wow.
Yeah.
And most of this movie is beautiful. I have a few scenes where I'm like, I didn't like that. But like largely, it's like, this is insane magic.
Yeah. Just seeing in that behind the scenes part where they have the different sizes of the cricket and Pinocchio.
That was crazy.
And then all of the different Pinocchio expressions. Each expression has a different head. And like it showed like what 34 faces of his or something.
There's like hundreds.
That were they're showing each and every like expression, and talked about how Geppetto was more detailed, but he had that mustache which really helped with like it was
that
cool.
The interesting thing about this movie technically is how it is both very legacy technology and very new. So Pinocchio is all replacement based. He's 100% 3D printed, and like you said, Mariah, every time his facial expression changes, they swap his face out.
Oh wow.
But a lot of the characters, because Guillermo wanted this, were mechanical, which is exactly like what King Kong was. The very first stop motion armature. It's very much the same. It's just got way more places to move and change expression. So it's kind of new old. And instead of foam latex like King Kong was, I think it's like a silicone latex. But it's really fine detail control, but there's all these other constraints. And the difference is with like Pinocchio, his animations worked out ahead of time. And so they know like what face they need because they printed all those facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the movie, there's like a 3D animator who will go through and like, here's the facial performance, and they print all that out. And then the animator knows, okay, on this frame, I need to put this face. So then the animators on set are doing more of the body stuff than the face. But with Geppetto and all the other characters, the animators in this movie are doing everything.
Wow.
And so it's this interesting hybrid of new and old. But again, my other like criticism of the movie is Carlo, Geppetto's son, is super creepy.
Oh,
because he's got this very smooth face. They kind of touched on it in the behind the scenes, like smooth faces are hard. They never said they nailed it, and I agree.
No, and he looked kind of sickly, like under his eyes, kind of the way they said that. Like he was really smooth and then weird around
I'm not
gonna
lie, I thought he was gonna die of a sickness.
Yeah,
because
I did
of
kind
how
of
he
too.
looked.
I was like, oh, he looks like he's
it's
unhealthy.
just hard to make a
I literally thought
Arabic boy look
Also,
okay.
what happened to Carlo's mom?
Don't talk about it.
And how old is Geppetto at the start versus how old is
and
he
then
when
it
he
was
builds
many
Geppetto?
years. How long it took
The
that
tree
tree
grew
to
quite
grow?
large.
Yeah.
I was thinking one thing.
And then the tree grew again quite large before Geppetto passed away. Like
Geppetto was like 1,000 years old.
It was like a fast-growing tree.
All these questions remind me of one thing. Why does Marty know Doc? You know what I mean? Like, why does Marty McFly know Doc? It makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it,
We'll get to that.
I think I give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, all right, he's a weird old dad for some reason. I don't know.
His wife was like
But
20,
then you-
Or
25.
he's just one of those guys that's looked old forever,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
It's-
only
it's,
35.
James
Yeah.
Hong.
Oh.
Yeah, he's Anthony Hopkins.
He's oh,
I
Anthony
don't
looks
know.
younger today than he did before. Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing that was interesting because I started digging into this. So the other thing that happens in animation in general, 2D animation or stop motion animation, if a film is 24 frames per second, you only really animate 12 of those frames, and then you hold
Smart.
those pictures on twos, and your brain combines it, and it looks smooth. Part of this movie is on twos. Part of this movie is on ones. Snow White, they authored on ones because they were like overachieving at the time.
Okay.
So it's really smooth.
Till the
That's
end.
So
And they
much
got
more
really
work, right?
tired.
Right.
Yeah, you're literally doubling the
Doubling
work.
your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's interesting, and I couldn't quite figure out why. Like in movies like Into the Spider-Verse, there's kind of story-driven, character-driven reasons why some characters are on twos or on ones. That's interesting. I couldn't quite figure out with this movie why that happened. But and it also have scenes where the body of Pinocchio is on twos and his arms on ones, like as he's waving.
Oh,
And it's like,
funny.
They made the right choices because I couldn't tell at speed viewing. It looks super smooth. I was like, did they animate this whole thing on ones? Like, my God, like that is so much
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, and
then it turns
I
out
would never
they
have
kinda
known.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever they chose to do fooled me. I had no idea.
That's
It's
fascinating.
it's a ton of work. And then the other thing that's always interesting too in modern stop motion is the use of armatures. So in the old days, they'd have to like drill in under a table and
Right.
screw in the character.
Right.
And every time he stepped, they have to re-screw it in. But now because characters jump and leap, they have these armatures that they sort of comp out and use motion control. So there's a ton of VFX to get that stuff out and to put in the background. And it's interesting, like this movie, Guillermo kept talking about, animation is a medium, not a genre, and it can tell any numbers of stories because it's purely a medium. And like they weren't snobby about that in a way that I really appreciated. It's like, yeah, we're gonna digitally have backgrounds because that's what makes more sense. But we're gonna use all these traditional techniques because we want that feel. Anyway, like the craftsmanship in this movie is phenomenal. It's pulling from techniques that are as early as stop motion ever was to the most modern versions, and it's just charming because of that. And I think that's the other thing with stop motion that makes it stand the test of time is it is real things that are being filmed. And so your brain knows that.
Yeah.
And it
The
just
sets,
kind of
the sets are real sets.
Yeah.
They're little
it
bits.
adds to that level of like believability. You go, well, this was a real object in a real location. And so maybe Carlo's face is off-putting, but I'm like, that was a real face somewhere and it's moving.
Yeah.
And so you're drawn in, and I think that's the charm of it. And that's why a lot of people try and kind of recreate that look even in 3D at times.
I just kept thinking about, imagine you have a really cool animated movie that's like, your classic 3D or 2D movie. But then you find out that this stupid stop motion picture is actually going to be done the same year your film comes out. How angry would you be? Like, well, that's not fair. They spent 7 years on theirs. Mine's like a 6-month project.
But also, it's $35 million budget.
That's cheap.
Yeah. That kind of makes you go, is that all into labor? Like, is that,
Yeah,
fairly
it
everything
sounds
else
like
would
Kate
be
Blanchett didn't ask
How
for a lot of
cheap
money.
are you,
Yeah.
Pat? That's what I really want to know.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting things is this is a lot more like an indie film in that there's not a ton of sets, but they build them out for real.
Yeah,
And
multiple sizes.
I think they said, there might have been like 12 animators working at the same time.
But it was 3.
And there's so much pre-production work. But again,
3
it's
or
never like
4.
a ton of people.
Yeah, but there's like 3 or 4 separate production companies.
Yeah, in Mexico and Portland area, I think.
I love that he's
else,
like,
but-
I knew I want.
Jim Henson Company.
He says in that documentary, I'm like, I want to show how good the Mexican animators were. Yeah, Guillermo.
Yeah,
Represent,
cool,
dude.
and like they're going to be the primaries on like Pinocchio and Geppetto.
Thought
It
that was
kind of
dope.
looked like you couldn't really do that for entirety of production, but I liked that that was
Yeah,
the main
that
idea,
was dope.
and they did phenomenal. Like
Mhm.
it is, there are scenes
The whole
as an
group
animator
worked
watching really
together
good
so well.
animation
Yeah.
Mm,
that I just go, oh, like
really,
that's so
cool.
good,
And
and
knowing
it
knowing
makes
that
me
they
mad.
got also knowing going into it that they got to take this story and make it a Guillermo del Toro. You know, they're capturing his, fantastical sensibility about how he makes movies, and they're making it into an animation. So like the creativity and then the direction that these people had to have had. I mean, the fact that these guys all worked together as a team and made this and made it look like his movie. I mean, it was just, it was so cool. There's definitely some plot things that maybe wouldn't
Which
have
is,
gone
I think,
with.
to me, true of every Guillermo del Toro movie.
Sure.
But
Sure.
but there's like a joy in his filmmaking that you get as an audience member that you go, that's fine.
And listening to him talk about it too. He's for what he puts out there, he's a very joyful seeming person.
Oh, yeah.
He loves what he does. He appreciates all this stuff, and
Yes.
his imagination
Yeah.
is off the charts.
It's only 35 million. That is less than The Nightmare Before Christmas and
Did
The
you check my
Fantastic
work?
Mr. Fox. No, I was just looking up other stop motion features just to see
Yeah.
how they compare.
Oh, the budget?
It's cheaper than Nightmare Before Christmas, which came out in 92. It's cheaper than Fantastic Mr. Fox, which came
This
out
is also
in 09.
Wikipedia telling me this.
Well, yes, I'm telling me this on the other
Can
ones as
fact
well.
check if you-
so-
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm
good.
just saying.
That's the fact that
We,
we stick with.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I can't believe how, and it's longer than Fantastic Mr. Fox and Nightmare Before Christmas too. Like this is,
I think it's the longest stop motion movie ever.
yeah, it's not short. I couldn't believe it.
One thing that I really enjoyed also about this version of the story is that in the Disney and in this one, the Blue Fairy says, little puppet made of pine, and they focus on the pine cone in this.
Nice.
Like the scales of death resemble pine cone scales.
Yep.
And
Great.
and the fact
great
that
design.
his son dies going back into the church for the perfect pine cone that he'd found, and then the tree is planted from that pine. Like that was really cool for me, like the symbolism or the the continuity or the circle of life type of thing that they put into it, which was definitely not didn't exist. And he didn't have a son that died in the Disney movie, but at least not that they showed.
I mean, there's a
Not
lot.
that we knew.
Yeah.
Possibly. Who knows? Yeah.
Which
Geppetto was
actually, I
just a
thought made it
lonely
all a
old
little less-
bachelor.
I felt like it made it a little less creepy.
Yeah.
This version, like he lost a young son, so he rebuilt a young son. Old Geppetto in the Disney version are like, why do you want a little boy? There's like questions. That you go, why is your fish so sexy? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, there's no Cleo in this.
Yeah.
I forgot about Cleo and Figaro. There's no
Figaro.
Yeah.
Figaro. Oh.
So as weird as Guillermo takes it, it's also
not-
less.
But somehow less
problematic.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Guillermo takes out the fox and the cat and puts
Kind
in
of.
the fox-like guy
You
that runs
actually
the
really
circus.
liked that he was a weird hybrid,
Mhm.
and then
And that the
I think
monkey
you saw
was
it
in
in the Spezzatura. And then, but you guys saw in that like behind the scenes that they had a Stromboli type guy that was like the
for
villain,
Sure.
and he's in
Starring
the background.
our favorite Christopher Waltz, who's just amazing. Speaks 17
no,
languages.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the villain is Christoph Waltz, wonderful always. But no,
Always.
the original design of the bad guy was more like Stromboli
Oh, I
from
didn't know that.
the movie.
Pinocchio, big old hulking dude, big old beard,
Mhm.
and they had him like done, and Guillermo was like, I don't think this is right. It should be this guy. And so
funny.
you see him in just the background of the circus. He's kind of lifting weights because
That's
it's like
right.
they have a fully rigged dude
Yeah.
who was meant to be the original like main villain. They're like,
Yeah.
well, we
Get
gotta
out
use
of
him.
here.
Yeah.
So I have another question too. Was the bad guy's nose long because he's a liar?
I think so.
Because that was I'm like, oh, he's a liar because his nose is long.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Well, the
I
original
also loved all that stuff.
the original animation or the illustration of Pinocchio from the original stories has like the very long, pronounced nose, and so this version of Pinocchio body shape looks a lot more like him, although they have clothes on him and looks more like a person from the cereal. But
I liked all that part about Pinocchio feeling like, when Geppetto yells at him,
how come your
"With
nose
your burden," he was like, well, he believes that's true because his nose didn't grow. And
yeah,
I don't know, there's a lot of that
there's a lot
the
of that.
charm of him being naive grew on me. But man, when it started, I was like, I'm going to punch this puppet in the face.
Yeah. Well, and also Candlewick's transformation too, starts out a little lightly bully. Like, he's not even that bad at all. His dad's terrible, but you really like him and you buy that they're best friends. And
where my dog's at?
Wrigley.
He's helping out, of course.
So
thanks, Wrigley.
I love that this was the best animated feature, but I also wonder because who was it up against this last year? It was up against
what else was animated?
Raya and the Last Dragon, Mitchell's vs. the Machine, Luca, and Flea. So yeah, actually,
no, that was the year before.
That's the year before. That's Encanto.
It was Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish.
Oh, that was great, by the way.
Turning Red.
Did you see Puss in Boots, the last one?
Oh, we've seen it a lot of times.
Oh my gosh! Just talk about that animation for 2 seconds here, Pat.
So that was an interesting one where they're sort of hybriding between, again, Spider-Verse and traditional stuff at times. They're doing we call it stepped animation, where it's not interpolated in 3D. Up one pose can go blendy, 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 and that's interpolating.
Oh.
And so they purposefully cut out frames, and
for
it's
those
held.
at home, we have a new vocab word for things to fill out.
No more for today.
Interpolating? No, what?
Interpolation.
Interpolation. Okay.
Lowercase b.
Today's broadcast is brought by the letter Q. Okay.
They do a stepping keys as they step up as opposed to linearly or on a spline change. And so if you want held poses, which is kind of what classic film is, it's holding the pose for an amount of time before it changes.
Dope.
So anime does that, or just cheap animation would do it a lot.
Yeah.
Where it's like the body is staying still and then they animate the mouth.
Yeah.
The body would be
cheating.
Limited, and they would call that limited animation, but instead of cheap animation.
Whoa, Mariah, come on.
But it's all
they call it frugal animation.
Yeah.
I'm very smart. Thank you.
When it's purposeful, it's an interesting choice. Again, like Spider-Verse, Mutant Mayhem, the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is delightful. And then Puss in Boots at times. It's not the entirety of the movie, but at times they do it more in action scenes, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that was good.
Cool.
Although, if you put them next to each other, I certainly would have picked Pinocchio.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I was just thinking, it's just not as strong. It's a very strong class, but still a sequel.
For a movie that spun off from a franchise that won the first animated Oscar, Shrek, in 2001.
Oh, it's great.
It's pretty interesting that Puss in Boots has anything left in the tank.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
It was crazy. I'm like, oh, good, another sequel. I'm like, oh, and it's the best one.
I love the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They had great characters in it. And I think that, they dipped into something that has only been taken into characters that have only been represented in light, brief cartoons. Goldilocks doesn't have a lot of representation or...
It's kind of rough these days. It's a little Stockholm syndrome,
Whiny little girl that can't get comfortable.
I mean,
Yeah.
really, come on.
Eating everybody's food.
Again, dealing with mortality, right?
Again, yeah,
and
same thing.
family,
Same stuff.
relationships.
So
choosing what you're willing to risk your life for.
Yeah, exactly right. So this was so fun. I knew I wanted to see this movie, and I already saw Everything Everywhere at Once, so I was glad I kind of pushed us to go to the best animated feature from last year.
I'm happy for the push because it's one of the ones I hadn't seen.
So good.
Both of these were movies I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
I'd seen a lot of the others, but
Yeah. And it kind of gets me back in the mood of like, okay, so what's this year's Oscars going to look like? Have I seen them all? Is it going to be better?
yeah, let's get revved up.
So guys, this is our kind of like preempt to like, hey, Oscars are coming. Start watching some movies. You know that Barbie's going to get nominated. You know Oppenheimer's going to get nominated. And so we're going to try to watch some of these others that are probably going to be nominated because let's be honest, it's not a secret. And that's the printer in the back of me, so it must be it's almost time to go.
Your fax is coming in. Beep, boop, bop, bop, beep, boop.
Last thing. Give your 1-sentence review of this movie. No prep, guys. That's the rule. No prep. Okay, I'm ready. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, no, can't wait.
Okay, Guillermo del Toro amazes us with spectacle once again. With very few pitfalls, this hits on all levels and is a treat for not all ages, is a treat for not just Del Toro, for not Del Toro fans, but for the masses, something like that, who are over 12.
You'd have an editor, so it's fine.
Yeah, I'll get that through.
I'd clean that
I'll
up.
throw that in the chat CPG later, and then I get it all cleaned up. How about this? It's freaking good, guys. You should see it. There you go.
Go watch this movie.
A fresh, dark, fantastical take
so good.
on the classic story about a puppet.
Great.
That
was great,
was
Mariah. That was great.
Ready to go to the printers. As Guillermo says, animation is a medium, not a genre. And he used that medium to tell a wonderfully quirky, dark, loving tale of a boy and his father.
You're such a suck up. You're such a suck up to Guillermo. He's not going to call you, dude.
I very much like Guillermo.
Not yet.
Not yet. Guillermo,
Well, he's not going to call you if you haven't seen Pan's Labyrinth.
Guillermo, call me. It'd be great if I talked to him before you guys, and I haven't even seen Pan's Labyrinth.
I really liked Hellboy,
Hellboy 2 was my favorite.
The Golden Army.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks, guys. This has been a doozy, a deuce of doozies. The doozy deuce.
Double doozies.
The double doozies. Next week, we're going to talk about another movie getting ramped up for Oscar season because it's now the new year. Happy 2024. That is crazy to say.
Very.
But we're glad you're here with us.
Get ready to write it on your checks, guys.
That's right, folks. That's right.
For those of you that write checks.
And get those text forms ready. Oh, no. So start watching movies, guys. We got some movies to watch. Get ready for this Oscar season. And let's see if we agree or just think it's all not true at all. And it's just whoever pays them the most.
Like
Dollar bills, y'all.
Like us.
Oh, that's right. All right, guys. Take care. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.